Having had my Panigale 1199 for about 4 years now and been riding it in all kinds of conditions, I've found that this mod where you can manually turn the thermo fan on is actually a good idea. Like when you're riding in summertime and you've got no choice but you have to head into some heavy traffic and you're stopping at a lot of traffic lights, this bike's going to get really hot really quick. The Panigale has 2 radiators, the main one at the top and there's a smaller one at the bottom, and there's one fairly high performance cooling fan, but it's mounted right at the bottom, just on the bottom radiator. So I found that if the bike's running like about below 50 k's an hour, which is about 30 miles an hour, there's just not enough airflow through the radiators to keep the engine temperature down at its optimal temperature, which I found is about 80 degrees Celsius, which is about 180 degrees Fahrenheit. And so on this bike, when the BBS unit reads an engine temperature of about 103 degrees Celsius, which is about 217 degrees Fahrenheit, it'll activate the cooling fan, which will keep the engine operating within, the safe limits, but they're not the optimal temperature limits for maximum power output from the engine. And if it's on a hot day and you're slowing down a lot, the temperature is just going to keep climbing until it overheats. There's some videos on YouTube that show you how to modify the fan wiring, and it's basically will disconnect the fan from the BBS unit and you control it manually with a toggle switch. So it's basically just a hot wired thermo fan. You have a look at the video I saw. It was a guy in America called Fancy Animal, and his video is titled "How to Fix Panigale Overheating Cheaply." So having manual control over your cooling fan is actually a lot smarter way of managing your engine heat. So I found this is better than having the fan come on at just a preset temperature, because you can actually preempt when you're going to hit very heavy traffic or you're going to have to stop at some traffic lights, and you can turn the fan on approaching the hold-up while the engine's still at a moderate temperature to give it a head start, pulling heat out of the engine in preparation of having to deal with the insufficient airflow situation coming up. The one improvement I've made to this mod suggestion, instead of disconnecting the fan permanently from the bike's control system, I use the other pin on the toggle switch to connect the fan back to the BBS unit when you flick the switch off, or in this case you'll be flicking it back to the normal position where the bike will operate like you haven't even modified it. So in case you just flat out forget to turn the fan on, you won't overheat the bike accidentally. Modifications: there's a auxiliary USB power that tethers off the battery with a switch, on-off switch that I put behind this fairing, this guard. The other mod is I've got a manual override for the cooling fan, because it's ridiculous having to wait for it to come on at 103 degrees sitting in traffic, so I can just override it. And when you switch it back, it goes back into auto mode from the BBS unit, so in case you forget, it'll operate normally. This first diagram shows you how the fan's wired up to the bike as stock. So you can see there's the BBS connector, pin 1, has a red-green wire that goes all the way down to the 2-pin connector near the fan unit itself. And then I'll show you the modified diagram, which basically the only addition is there's a 10 amp inline fuse with a power cable that comes straight off the battery. You can either splice into the one that you got there, maybe for your utilities power, which what I've done, or you can just add a new one. And you supply power to your pin 3, and you wire the stock. You basically cut into the cable, the red-green cable that goes to the fan unit, and the fan side you'll connect to the middle pin, which is I've labelled as pin 2 here, and the supply from the BBS, just wire that to pin 1. That way, in this diagram, you'll see if it's flicked back, it'll 1 and 2 contacts will be connected, which will put it back to its normal operation mode, and then when you flick the switch forward, that will short out pins 2 and 3 as it rocks over, and that will actually force the fan on because you've hot wired it directly to the battery via your inline 10 amp fuse. And that's it. That's how it works. So this slide here I got from the manual. You can see with obviously with the left fairing off, looking down at the bracket where you've got your starter solenoid. Labeled D is your connector that connects the BBS unit to the fan unit. So that's the one you just take that black sheathing off, which exposes the red-green cable that you want to cut and splice into, and just solder to your toggle switch. So it's just a matter of drilling a hole in the plastic battery cover that will mount the toggle switch, and just solder and heat shrink the wires onto the back of it, and just cable tie your excess cables if you have them neatly underneath the lid, and pop the lid back on, and away you go.